Hi, my name is Hope, and I'm going to be talking about the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice. This movie is turning 20 this year, so a big milestone for it. And it is just one of many adaptations of the classic novel by Jane Austen, which was written in 1813. So let's get into it. So the director is Joe Wright. He directed a couple of works that you may have seen before. One of them is the historical drama of Winston Churchill during World War II. There's also the retelling of Peter Pan called Pan, and then the thriller titled The Women in the Window. He's also an English director, so a lot of his work kind of tend to um, go more towards that kind of a culture. Okay, so let's introduce you to the main cast. There are many other characters in here, but these are kind of the most important ones you should know. The first one is going to be our protagonist. Her name is Elizabeth Bennet. She was played by Keira Knightley. And then we're also going to have Mr. Darcy. His actor was Matthew Macfadyen. And during the movie, the first two that I have mentioned, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, really disliked each other. But towards the end, I'll talk about that more, but they end up liking each other and falling in love. So, the next one I'm going to talk about is Mr. Darcy's best friend, Mr. Bingley. He's played by Simon Woods. He is a very awkward character, but in a very endearing way. And then his love interest is going to be Jane Bennet, who is Elizabeth Bennet's sister. And she was played by Rosamund Pike. And then, lastly, for the main cast, is Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. So Mr. Bennet was played by Donald Sutherland and Mrs. Bennet was played by Brenda Blethyn. Mr. Bennet he loves his children a lot, but he definitely has a soft spot for Elizabeth more than the rest of his children, although he does love them all. And then there's Mrs. Bennet. She does love her children. There is a scene where she is very sad when one of her children leaves after getting married. But what we see throughout the majority of the movie is that she is actually just really focused on getting advantageous marriages for her daughters. Kind of goes above and beyond in that. For example, when Jane first met Mr. Bingley, his sister ends up inviting her over for tea, and their place is quite a bit of a different distance from the Bennet estate. And so Jane asks Mrs. Bennet if she can take the carriage, and so she doesn't have to walk. Now, the weather was turning out to be very nasty. It was raining, it was thundering, but Mrs. Bennet, with a plan in mind, says, no, you can take a horse. So she does, and she ends up falling ill. Now, during this time, it's set in Victorian England. So during this time, medicine was not very good, nothing like what we have nowadays. So when Jane falls ill with a fever and a really bad headache, coughing, all of these sorts of symptoms, she ends up staying with Mr. Bingley, which was Mrs. Bennet's intended goal the entire time. But this is also something that most of her sisters, especially Elizabeth, was worried about, just because there was not medication at that point that would really help her. But Mrs. Bennet was more just focusing on the fact that she was staying with Mr. Bingley, and hoping that this would end up in a match. She wasn't worried at all for her daughter's health. or at least that's what the movie portrayed her to be as. So that's just one example of that. And now I'm going to move on, and I'm actually going to show you a scene really quickly. In terms of cinematography, this is one of my favorite, if not the best cinema that this film specifically has. There's a lot of other great parts, but I really like this one specifically. It's just really beautiful, and I'm just going to show it to you really quickly. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I really like this scene. In the very beginning, it starts out with a pitch black screen, and then from there, all you start hearing are birds chirping. It's just so beautiful. And then after that, you just see a peaceful meadow, and then the sun starts rising over the meadow, and you still just hear the birds chirping until towards the end you start to hear the music of like the Victorian time period, classical music, and it's just honestly just so beautiful. um, I I really just love watching this. But yeah, so in terms of cinematography, this is my favorite scene. I think it's one of the most well done, but it could also just be because it's just so beautiful that I like it. Um, so the next part I'm going to show you is, okay, so there are a lot of spoilers in this part, but just so you know, so at one point Mr. Darcy goes to Elizabeth. About halfway through the movie, he professes his love for her. Now, this is a bit strange, as he does not seem like he has any sort of feelings towards her for the majority of the movie. It just kind of comes out of the blue. But that goes hand in hand with why Elizabeth then says no. Because, as the title of the film says, there is the Pride and Prejudice within this film. So, Elizabeth is very prejudiced against Mr. Darcy. She makes assumptions about him based off of various scenarios that happen and situations, and then things that she is told. She just starts to make assumptions, and she has prejudices against him without actually trying to make sure that what she's hearing is true, or that what she's seeing is what she thinks it is. So, she thinks that Mr. Darcy is very prideful, which he does come across that way if you don't know his true intentions behind what he's doing. What I mean by this is that he's very quiet. When he first comes in, he doesn't really talk to anyone except for his best friend, Mr. Bingley, and his sister. He will make the casual comment, but he doesn't do anything more than that. And it makes him seem like he is prideful, especially because he's very rich. A lot of people start to make assumptions that because he's rich, he is just thinking he's better than everyone else and doesn't deem to talk to other people. One other thing that Elizabeth mentions that makes him seem prideful is that he didn't dance with any of the women at the first ball that he attended, even though there were a lot of women who wanted to dance, but there weren't enough men to be partners. And he didn't ask any of them to dance. But he's actually just really shy, so he obviously didn't really want to do that, but he does start to gain feelings for Elizabeth, and that makes him even more shy, which makes her have even more assumptions about this. So anyways, at one point, he does profess his love for her, and she kind of throws it back in his face, and states her prejudices against him. And he's shocked and taken aback by all of this because none of them are true. And so what he does is he leaves and he goes to write a letter for Elizabeth explaining everything. And he ends up bringing this letter to Elizabeth, and she starts to feel so bad about making these assumptions about him and thinking he is so prideful, because he is the exact opposite. He is a very kind, wonderful man, and she just chose not to see that part of him. So she starts to feel really bad about it. So that's kind of the plot point of this scene. One part that I do want to note is that I really like how they used rain in this scene. In England, it does rain a lot, but in this film, there's not very many scenes with rain in it. One of the only main other scenes that you really see rain there's about 2 of them, and both of them are filled with a lot of sadness. So in this moment, it's very sad on Mr. Darcy's part, but also Elizabeth is filled with a lot of rage, and anger over, like, thinking he has the audacity to like her and propose to her, when she thinks he's such a terrible man. So I really like that they use rain in this scene. It just conveys more of the depth and the motion. But in terms of this camera work, I really like what they do in here, because what they do is they film over one person's shoulder and they do a mid shot of the other person's face. And they never show both of them at the same time. It's always one or the other, and it just goes back and forth throughout this entire scene, throughout their conversation. So that goes hand in hand with another scene that I'm about to play for you at the very end. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, and I'm just going to play it and then explain at the end. Okay. Okay.
I couldn't sleep.
Laura, my aunt.
Yes, she was here.
How can I ever make amends for such pain?
After what you have done for Lydia, and I suspect for Jane also, it is I who should be making amends.
You must know. Surely you must know it was all for you. You were too generous to trifle with me. I believe you spoke with my aunt last night and has taught me to hope, as I'd scarcely allowed myself before. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes have not changed. But one word from you will silence me forever. If, however, your feelings have changed, I would have to tell you have bewitched me, body and soul, but I love you. I never wish to be parted from you from this day on.
Well then.
Okay, so that scene is, first of all, the writing, the dialogue, the words, just so beautiful. Love it. But what I really want to focus on is, if you noticed, they did the same thing as the last scene I was just talking to you about. So they would shoot over one person's shoulder and they would just capture the face of the other person, and they would go back and forth throughout this exchange. But then if you notice at the very end, as you can see right now, it actually shows both of them at the same time. And it only happens and occurs when Elizabeth is saying to him that she loves him also, and she wants to be married to him. And it's only when they both come together in their love that the camera also shows them together. I really love that part. I also really like the part that they put the sunrise in here, just like the very beginning when the film started. So that was a really beautiful part. And I also want to say, right before this, he was walking towards Elizabeth, and this goes into my next point about the music. So as he was walking towards Elizabeth, the music was very dramatic and beautiful. And so that goes towards how the emotional depth, what that is like in this scene. So it's more of a hopeful kind of musical kind of a sense at that point. So I'm gonna go into talking about how music was really important in this film. So at the very beginning, you could see, or you heard, that the music was very quiet and beautiful and whimsical. But then after that scene, the camera points to the flurry of the Bennet house, as they have just heard that Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy are coming into town, and they're talking about how rich he is, and they're so excited because they want to make a match. So the music changes and it crescendos and it becomes louder and excited and more flurried with the people on camera. So the importance of the music is that it really changes and it helps drive the plot. It helps give that emotional depth. And then, of course, they play music that is of the time period in Victorian England. So I really enjoyed that they did put that in here. I also noticed that the main instrument that they liked to use was the piano. There were a couple characters in here who did play during the movie, and both times it was the piano that they were playing. So that is the music. I think it's just a really important and key part of this film. And I want to get into my rating and talk about the goods and bads of this film. So I gave it a 4-star. I think it is a beautiful work of art. I love the music. I love the acting and the cast. They all did just such a wonderful job in here. Most of the cinematography was really beautiful also. I really enjoyed it. There were a couple parts I noticed that there were pauses that were really awkward, that really didn't seem to fit into the film. It was just kind of weird how it didn't kind of help drive things along, and they should have kept those pauses out of the movie. There were a couple parts where it just felt really awkward and weird. So that's one of my keynotes about it. Of course, this film is not going to be as good as the book, because the book is just a masterpiece. So that's kind of my rating. I would definitely recommend that you watch this.